Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's second Independent Media's Black Wednesday webinar. My name is Siyavuya, and I will be moderating today's discussion on media diversity, a topic that is very close to many of us in the media industry, where we basically probe and really reflect on whether the demographics of our country are reflected, the very diverse and different demographics in our country, whether those are reflected in the media, whether there's a fair representation of race, gender, the diverse ethnic identities, and of course, cultures. As you can see, I'm not alone. I'm joined by a very exciting panel. On my right is rather, let me start with on my far bottom right is Kate Skinner. She is the Executive Director at the South African National Editors Forum. And just at the bottom, on her left, on her right, is Slindile Khanyile. She is the co-founder of Umbele Online, which is an isiZulu online business publication, and I would like you to join me in congratulating Sandile Mdadane, the newly appointed editor of Sunday Tribune. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for your time. And as I've indicated today, we only have 60 minutes. In fact, we have less than that now to get through this very complex yet very important discussion. And the format of today's discussion is going to be as follows. I'll open the floor for our panelists to basically reflect on firstly, I would like to hear what Black Wednesday means to them, and secondly, basically touch on some of the aspects that speak to media diversity. And I'd like to begin with you, and then thereafter, of course, before I begin with Kate, we're going to have a question and answer session from myself, and then thereafter we're going to open the floor for the audience. But Kate, to just kickstart this discussion, let me have your take really on Black Wednesday, which is Press Freedom Day, which was celebrated on Monday, and basically, do we have a reason to celebrate? Because one of the main issues around Black Wednesday was the diverse voices that the apartheid government wanted to silence in the media. But before we get into that question, whether we have a reason to celebrate, just reflect for us your assessment on Black Wednesday rather.
So yes, I mean, so we it was Black Monday. You're right, because we actually celebrated it on a Monday. Yeah, I mean, Black Wednesday is an incredibly important day, and I think it's important for a number of reasons. One is that we can look back to, that terrible time under apartheid, where all of these different publications were closed, and journalists literally jailed. And I think that if we look back at that particular time and we look at where we are now, of course, we have made massive strides. There are no journalists that have been jailed in South Africa. We have an incredible constitution that protects media freedom, protects freedom of expression, protects and promotes access to information. And although we don't always implement things as best as we can, those principles are there, and they absolutely safeguard media freedom. So there have been huge strides. I think the one area that we are very worried about as SANEF is very much the issues around the financial sustainability of the media, and the numbers of jobs that have been lost and the number of publications that have closed. Before COVID and particularly under the pandemic and the lockdown period. And so when we were looking at, Black Wednesday, one of the big issues was around sustainability. And I think that that's also really important for our debate today, because, media sustainability issues, of course, really impact on media diversity issues and unfortunately shrink media diversity. And that is also another area that we are very, very concerned about.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Sli, I want to come to you just to give you an opportunity to set the tone. Kate raises the issue of media sustainability, but I mean the question really, just to get things going with your side. I mean, we are 26 years into the democracy, yet we're grappling with the issue of media diversity. Have we done enough from your side? I'm not sure if we can hear you, Sli.
Hi, good morning. Sorry.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Interestingly, I listened to or I watched partly the webinar which was hosted by vets, and I think it was the first agri-cluster lecture, also commemorating Black Wednesday. And one of the people who was on the panel was Ubabu Joshua, who said, you know, back then, it was, though it was difficult for them, but it was very simple because it was either you were for or against apartheid. But things for us now are very complicated because, you know, we acknowledge, as Kate has said, we acknowledge all the strides that have been made from that since that time. But if you look at how we have to tell the story now, it gets very complex because on the one hand, you want to contribute in supporting the vision, for example, of the government, where you're saying you still need to have transformation and there are all these social ills that we still have to fight for or against, which is, you know, inequality, poverty, unemployment, and you know, government's program. But on the other, you also do obviously have a responsibility to hold the very same government, even though the governing party is a liberation movement, you know, to account. And one of the challenges that we have experienced is where in doing that, where we hold, you know, the government to account, there's this notion that, you know, we are meant to turn a blind eye to the transgressions of the government purely because the ruling party, you know, is the liberation movement, which is, you know, which doesn't make sense, because if we were to do that, then we will, you know, be betraying not only what today is about and what that generation was fighting for, but the very same audience that we are saying must actually consume our products. Because if, you know, by holding the government account, it is about saying that ultimately the people who are impacted negatively by this, it is the public, you know. So I think that's really one of the challenges that we face. But what has also then happened is you can see, you know, diversity remains, to answer your question directly, that I think the question of diversity remains a critical one because, you know, any society or any dominant narrative in society reflects, you know, the power struggles or the power relations rather. And you can see, you know, in the way that stories are told, as I've mentioned, you know, poverty, inequality, and unemployment, those three ills impact the majority of the people in this country, which are Black people. But those stories are not told daily, are not told aggressively. You know, we reflect on unemployment only when Stats SA releases unemployment figures. That's, you know, we do that, we move on to the next headlines. But it is a story that we should be making noise about daily. You know, if take what happened, you know, when the country went into lockdown, the disparities in our education system were amplified when the majority of the children could not automatically move into remote learning. And that has a lot to do with the failures in the system. But how many of, the stories that we tell reflect on the failures of the education system, which we are meant to make noise about? Because those failures are not just about today, they're about tomorrow's generation. And to a certain extent as well, we do privately also say that there were certain schools or certain part of the education system during apartheid in Black areas that worked, which are now not working. And it's a conversation, again, that we need to have, and have candidly. I could go on and on even about the health system. And without coming across as insensitive, the country has effectively come to a standstill because of one murder in Senegal. But there are 20,000 murders that happen in South Africa daily, or rather annually, sorry. And I mean, in the province where I am from, there's Gliblands Hostel, where we've had thousands of people or hundreds of people being killed, and no one has been convicted. But the country did not come to a standstill. And that just, again, for me, reflects, who still has a dominant voice in society, and whose issues still matter. And it reflects as well, because I think of, ownership patterns in our industry. It reflects as well because of management patterns in our industry, because I think our demographics of, the majority of the population are reflected to a certain extent, but you will see them mainly in community media, which though, because of lack of financial resources and the type of, skills and the caliber of people at that level, you do not get the kind of, I think, quality journalism that you get, in mainstream media. So while the numbers there show a true reflection, but the impact doesn't, because community media, they can barely afford to pay salaries and employ experienced people. So what they will do will also reflect that.
No, thanks. Jeez, you've raised quite a lot. I must say, Slee, thank you very much for that. Sandile, Slee is raising the issue of not having enough representatives, or not the demographics in management in various companies, not really reflecting the demographics of our country. As the editor, how do we change that? But firstly, I want you to reflect on Black Wednesday. But I want you to also talk about how do we change the issue of having these demographics and all these races and gender in management, and is there an appetite, do you think, to change how this system is now and how it functions going forward?
Okay, no, Slee raises quite good points in terms of diversity, even within newsrooms. So I think to tackle that, it is something that needs to be attended to at the recruitment stage. The demographics of the country are quite well known; they are quite clear. But it's quite easy to see that the people who call the shots, are those who control the purse strings. So now you find that the majority of the people with the most numbers in terms of demographics, are then reduced to a sector that is voiceless, But in reality, there's nobody who is voiceless. I think we need to disabuse ourselves from labeling certain sectors as being voiceless. We don't have such. We just have a section of the population that is neglected, and neglected willfully. It's quite easy today, for a child in a leafy suburb to go missing. and it will trend, quite rapidly. And every maybe media organization would want to be interested in telling that kind of story. But as we sit here right now, today, this minute, there's hundreds of children that are missing, and at times you need certain financial muscle for you to be able to be listened, for you to be able to tell your story. And I think the newsroom, across groups, should really look at itself and wonder if it's really telling the stories that the people, need to read, because it seems like there's this overemphasis in media organizations, wanting to cater to only the markets that you've targeted. And there are many fault lines with regards to that approach, because there are certain things, that get overlooked quite easily. And that is when it's easy for the corporate, or even, the powers that be in politics or in government, want to dictate the agenda of the newsroom. I'll give you an example. As we are commemorating Black Wednesday today, the reality is that there will always be the relationship between government and the media will always be, not a very smooth one, because of the interests that differ. But it doesn't mean that government should treat the media as if it is the opposition. It is in the opposition benches, because there is that tendency for even people who have been in the newsroom, who are communications officers, who want to treat journalists like they are in the opposition benches. And this finds expression, in the many ways in which you would find senior government leaders threatening radio stations and the newspapers that you don't cover us enough, and therefore we are not going, to be spending any money in terms of putting ads in your brands, because you are not covering us in a manner that, would want. That is a form of dictatorship. But we are living under a democratic government, but yet you have these tendencies, where people want to dictate content in newspapers. The apartheid regime was quite overt in its disdain, for critical alternative media, which is why we have days like Black Wednesdays, Black Wednesday. But our government also, as democratic as it is, it needs to question itself how it spends its money. That are they using their ad spend to dictate, the narrative, or are they using it to reach the masses, to communicate their message? Because that happens, and it happens also with retail. There's a lot of friction that exists between editorial and sales, whereby you'll find salespeople wanting to question you why you would be writing a story that has to do with shop floor politics, where it's quite clear that workers in a certain retail are being treated unfairly, and as a media organization, you'd want to give those people a platform to express how they are being treated. But you find that retail will give you that thinly veiled thread that but we are spending so many thousands in your organization. How come you are giving space to these to these kind of stories? So we cannot, being an honest journalist with who is guided by ethics, allow human rights abuses just because a retail that has a national footprint tells you that you should look away when they are abusing their workers. So these things, they find expression in very many ways.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Kate, what is clear from what we've discussed is that perhaps there is, to an extent, as Slindile say, there is some sort of reflection of, our media does reflect to an extent, the demographics of the country, but the problem seems to be at a managerial level, at an ownership level. Now, then this comes again to the question that really we've been grappling with the industry, right? The question of transformation. Why is it important for us to transform the South African media now more than ever? That's the first question I have with regards to this aspect, and secondly, with transformation, always comes the issue of, gender parity. Are we having, from your observation, are we having enough women in positions, in senior positions in our media industry here in South Africa?
So thank you. Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, transformation of the media industry is absolutely critical. And of course, major strides have been made, during this post-apartheid period, but not necessarily enough. And I think there's a very interesting quote that Professor Tawana Coupe made when he was looking at the issue of diversity, and I just want to read it to you because it's very, very good, and it kind of captures just how complex diversity is and how much needs to be done, and at all the different levels. So basically what he says is full diversity in the media should cover the whole value chain, from ownership through media producers to the content, i.e. the presentations of social reality they produce, to the audiences that consume that content. In relation to content, it's not only an editorial program focus and perspective that are important, but also a multilingual or diverse linguistic context like South Africa that needs to be reflected. We need the range of languages that are used across the different media platforms. The range of images or representations is also of critical importance to full media diversity, especially if we're looking at visual media. So basically what he's saying is that we need to look at the level of media ownership and control. We need to look at transformation in terms of all the different kinds of content that we have. We need to look at transformation in terms of language. Does our media reflect the different languages in the country? And then does it actually cover all the different audiences in the country? And when you look at it at that level, wow, there is so much work to be done, and it's so many different levels. And I think that is why, just kind of, circling back to my original point about, some of the media sustainability issues and some of the problems that we're experiencing under COVID, we've made huge progress, but some of that might actually be rolled back now. When we look at some of the real problems with what is happening in terms of media sustainability issues and some of the funding issues.
Is there an appetite to diversify to the extent that we can say we can all celebrate and say, look, I mean, South Africa is, South African media in particular is reflective of all the languages, of all the cultures, of all the ethnic, diverse ethnic identities. Is there an appetite that you observe from your experiences that we can make it happen? Your sound has a problem again, Slee.
Sorry, Sia. I'm saying I don't think that there is enough appetite, and this is doesn't only apply to the media industry, just generally in South Africa, because as a country, we need to transform on all levels. Even where we're saying that we have transformed, it's really been at very superficial level. So I don't think there is enough, because for it to show that there is enough, then it needs to be backed up with proper support, proper skill support, proper financial support, and as Sandile mentioned, if you're going to be operating in an environment where you are then going to receive support only if, yes, of course, in business, it must still make business sense, and, but it should not be, people must, if you are genuine about supporting the media and what it's trying to do, then, it should not mean that we must compromise how, we practice our craft, because in order for me to get an ad, then it means I must overlook something. Then you are compromising me, you're compromising my credibility, which is ultimately, what we rely on as the media. Yes, we should find common ground. So I don't think that there is enough appetite. And again, that is because of, who still really controls and runs, the country, because we need, in order to do these things, we need a lot of financial support, and if you look at the number of media organizations that have had to close shop because of COVID, and if you look at how much has really been raised to say, okay, guys, we cannot afford to have media organizations closing shop. Here we are. And there are a number of corporates in this country. And yes, some I know have come on board. I know SANEF has raised some money and has assisted, some people, and they're going to be rolling out even more to assist. But, in the bigger scheme of things, it's really been, I think, very minimal. And again, if you look at the challenges that we have had as the industry, which existed even before COVID-19, even then, it actually, from where I sit, I think a lot of people were actually happy to see a weakened media industry, because we've had challenges for at least a good decade now, if not more, and it seems to suit, a lot of the people who are in power, to have a weakened media industry, because then it will take us forever to do proper investigations on your Steinhoffs of this world, on government corruption and everything else, if you have a weakened media industry. And unfortunately it has, we do see it in the way that we tell these stories, because
I think Slay is just having connection problems. We'll try to get that fixed. But Kate, you spoke about a very important issue, which is the issue of language. And I just want to quote a opinion piece that the founding editor of isiZulu isiXhosa, which was established some 5 years ago in East London, Untitled Chapter, and he states in his opinion piece that it was only in 2015 that South Africa saw the first daily Xhosa newspaper, isiZulu isiXhosa. It is now a weekly newspaper. People loved it, but because the business model relies on external factors such as advertising, it was not sustainable as a daily. This cannot be. I'm sure this is a sentiment that you also agree with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think the big issue is that it is so important that, our citizens get media and information in their home language, and in languages that, that they feel immediately comfortable and happy to converse, and also, if you're talking about radio, to be able to phone in and discuss the issues, there, or if we're talking about online, to be able to communicate as well. So you're completely right. I mean, it is hugely problematic, because basically what we have is the SABC's African language stations as really the only media that is daily, hourly, we have it as a major source of information. But, again, if we look at the issue of diversity, it's not a great situation to have really only one major source of news, for the majority or for a large portion of our citizens. And again, the point that you're making about the financial sustainability issues is so key, because what you're needing is funds either via government or via donors or via corporates, via advertising, in order to sustain that media. And I think that's the crisis that we are facing now, and the issue that SANEF is looking at. What kind of financial models do we need to put in place in order to ensure that we get, media in all the languages that we need to get out, and to get it out daily? I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a problem for something to come out only weekly. Of course, it's great that it's coming out, but it needs to come out more regularly.
Yeah, in fact, one of the questions that just came through is about, can we also speak about financial inclusivity for news to be accessible to everyone, even for the disadvantaged communities? So I guess the most important thing here when we talk about diversity is there should be money available to sustain these publications.
So absolutely, and I mean, I think that the issue is that there's always this ongoing debate about the SABC, and the fact that there should be a certain amount of public funds that go into the SABC in order for it to fulfill its public mandate. There's also a lot of, and I mean, it's been an ongoing battle, and it's interesting, if you look at the SABC's funding model, it only gets a tiny percentage of funding from government, and in fact, the vast majority of the money that goes to the SABC is in fact advertising, and that's not an ideal situation. There should be more public funds going in. Also, with community media, which I think is such an important point, and which was raised by my fellow panelists. The problem with community media is they also really struggle to sustain themselves. And again, we need to look at a financial model that is more effective and easier for them. And so one of the big things that they've been calling for is a certain amount of government advertising to go to the community media sector in order for them to have more funds. So I think all of those kind of issues are now, they've always been critical, but they're now even more critical. We have to discuss those. Those are the issues as an industry that we have to put on the table and move and take decisions on.
Yeah. And Kate, you briefly quoted Professor Coupe, who penned an opinion piece in some of our titles this week, and I would like to have your take, Sli, on what he says. I think in the same opinion piece, it says a major current threat is lack of media diversity, characterized by a few large media companies owning multiple media outlets that toe the same editorial line and give access to but a few voices, and this has escalated while several small media companies and investigative media outlets that managed to publish the voice of the voiceless in the apartheid era did not survive beyond the first decade of democracy. So I guess what he's trying to say is that within us as the media, there seems to be louder voices than others. How is this happening?
I think it's true. I think it is because of the ownership patterns. Because if you look at I'll speak just about newspapers, for example. I mean, there are only 4 major groups, and that's pretty much that. And if you were to try, I mean, for example, with what we have done, we are literally a month old. It would have been very difficult, even in an environment where the economy was growing and there was no COVID-19 outbreak. But it would have been very difficult if we had tried to launch a newspaper. And it's simply because of the way the 4 groups, operate and the dominance that they have and the systems. Because, I mean, just to get distribution going, would be such a hassle, and you'd have to rely on these very 4 media groups, one of them to either partner with them or to distribute through their distribution channel. So there are all those issues, and it's true, and we need to try and change that. And I think in a way COVID-19 has been a blessing in disguise, because it has really forced the industry to look at new ways, because we've had, the advent of online has been with us for some time now. But as dominant media groups, what we did, we were really just dismissive. And I think it's also partly why we gave online content for free, because for us it was about protecting newspaper revenue. So we couldn't be bothered. So now COVID-19 has forced all of us to change things and find new ways of doing things. And so now we need online to work. And so now, we now having proper conversations around this. And I think because online is not so capital intensive, what it then does, it opens up an opportunity for more media players, because what as well has unfortunately been part of the problem is, even when you get people who come through with financial resources, it has been problematic, I think, just like in football, where you get people who are just venture capitalists, who are not necessarily in it for the heart. And of course, I know as journalists, we get idealistic about these things. These people are running a business, and we are just about the passion and the craft, and the two somehow always conflict. But what COVID has done is, at least it gives those of us who, are in it for the passion, but also, can then have an opportunity to try and do the things which we always say, but these media owners don't understand that this is what journalism is about. And hopefully, we'll be able to strike a balance, between the two, because you obviously still need to survive.
Yeah, Sandile, there's the issue of language. I'll come to you now, Kate. There's actually a question for you. The issue of language and its importance. Reporting rather in languages that represent the people that live in South Africa is quite part of the problem, or lack of reporting in languages that represent South Africans is I think largely features in this discussion. And I think sometime earlier this year, before COVID, I asked the president in isiXhosa, and in the room there was some. It was a bit tense. I could sense some bit of tension. Are we as media practitioners? Are we doing enough as media practitioners to show the importance of speaking in our languages, even though there seems to be a blockade to do so?
Yeah, I'm not sure if posing the question in such a manner, is really what the problem is. I think generally, when you look at how South Africa is made up, we have 11 languages, but there is only a few languages, that are quite dominant, English being the first in that summit. But I think the advent of a newspaper, maybe like isiZulu, for instance, proved to people that it's important, to give other languages a chance. Because for me, the issue of language is also an issue of economy. There are these prejudices that still linger. I remember I was still with isiZulu, when one of the retails opened here in KZN. I wouldn't mention a name. But the owner of that retail, said that he wouldn't advertise in isiZulu because he is not targeting the taxi rank market. And by that, of course, you know what that means. But to his shock and surprise, the foot traffic at that store was the very same people that he wanted to run away from. And it took a lot of convincing for that retail, to advertise with isiZulu. So I think it's not that our indigenous languages are not effective. It is just that because it's an economic problem, certain brands don't want to be associated with Black people. That's a fact, and because they think that Black people don't have enough money, maybe to be able to access their brands, and at times, even though maybe they may realize that a Black readership would be their market, but they don't want to spend money in publications that are consumed strictly by Black people. So I think even for journalists, if I work, say for instance, in Western Cape, I should be fluent in isiXhosa. I should think so. Because you look at, if I go out of the newsroom to any assignment, maybe I'm sent to Khanyile, how am I going to communicate with the residents there, if I'm only going to conversate with them only in English? That goes for other provinces as well, because you need to understand also that our population is still a bit segmented along language, So I think it's quite important, to ensure that the issue of multilingualism or being bilingual, should be a requirement, at least, for media practitioners to be able to effectively, communicate, with audiences where they reside.
Yeah, Kate, there's a question for you here saying that if you're going to produce social impact and national interest news, you need a new business model. What is SANEF doing to support the media?
So I think a couple of things. So one of the things that we did was do a whole lot of research about the impact of COVID on the media industry. And it was a very insightful, interesting piece of research because it pointed to where the particular fault lines were. So it looked at the issue of the fact that print media was particularly badly impacted. It also looked at the fact that community print media was very badly impacted. And it also looked at the fact that freelancers had, which was important, were having a particularly bad time, and that some of them had literally lost up to 100% of their income. So that was the first step. The second step was then to say, well, it's all well and good to have done this research and to see how bad the situation is, but we do need to do something about it. And so from there, we set up a fund, basically a media emergency fund. I mean, of course, it's only a drop in the ocean, but I think it has done some kind of support, but given the need out there, of course, it is small. But what we then did is we gave out small 5,000 rand grants to journalists that had lost their jobs and lost their income under lockdown. We've gone through a first phase of that. We've just about to complete a second phase of it. And then a third phase is basically to look at sustainability interventions. So to look at things like, zero rating of data for news sites, to look at things like Facebook and Google, and the issue of the fact that they basically eat up most of the advertising revenue online, to look at small small community print media, ways to assist them going online. So those are some of the projects that we're looking at. And at the moment, in terms of the amounts of money that we have for that project, or for those projects across the board, it's just under 5 million rand. So it's a starting point, but at least it's something.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that, Kate. Sli, I want to get your thoughts around the issue of financing community, because I think that's the lifeblood of addressing this issue of diversity, the community media. Are we investing enough in that? And is our support to community newspapers, is our support enough for them to survive, particularly now during this COVID period?
I don't think we are investing enough, Sia. And yes, credit to the MDGA, which does give a lot of support to community media through the annual grants. But I do think that it would go a long way to get corporate South Africa to come through, maybe through things such as enterprise development, for example. Because it's also not just, as I said, it's not just about the finance, but there's also the issue of the skills. You know, finance plays a critical role because it enables you to have the right kind of resources, you know, the right level of experience, but you also need the skills, and this perhaps needs to, it's unfortunate that, of course, now mainstream media itself doesn't have enough people, but perhaps it's opportunity to create some kind of new jobs for colleagues, experienced colleagues who have lost jobs, where you then also create, you know, training, ongoing training programs, or even have them get involved with newsrooms of community media, where maybe even as resident coaches, because you know, at the moment what we have really done is you have the volume, but it's really just that it's a number of organizations. But if you look at the impact that they have, especially from a news coverage, I'm not going to talk about programming and music. Perhaps they really, but if you look at, if you listen to some of those stations and the quality of the stories, you know, how they tell their stories, you can tell that, you know, something is missing. You can tell, and you don't blame them. There is only so much they can do with the kind of resources, you know, that they have. And I think that we do need to have more interventions and see how there could also be collaborations between mainstream media and community media, because you know, if we can tell stories better at any level, and perhaps, as I said, the examples that I also gave at the beginning of our conversation about how we need to be telling stories about poverty daily, we need to be telling stories about, you know, unemployment. And while one will understand that, you know, mainstream media, because of the resources that are now also available, they will, especially with daily publications, they will move on to the next headline because that's what they have to do. But if community media is capacitated properly and supported well, then those issues can, at their level, you know, be told consistently, and hopefully, you know, represent you know, the narrative of everyone in the country.
Kate, the government always has a role in how we, I guess, in our daily lives, and that also applies in how the media to an extent operates. But you would have noted, and this is a question coming from one of the people who is in the audience, is that you know, isn't sort of like a setback to have government officials attacking media or media houses that drive the transformation agenda. Among those media houses is independent media. I guess the question, in summary, wants to know which the person wants to know is how much of a threat does this pose to media diversity, as it implies, or it's quite similar to what the apartheid did in 1977.
So just if I get the question correctly, you're saying that sometimes what we have is we have government leaders attacking the media, and what does it do for media diversity if government leaders attack the media? Yeah?
Precisely.
So I mean, I think my sense is, this is the important thing, I think, for the media. I mean, it's not like we're above criticism. Of course we're not. I mean, sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we put forward opinions that people dislike hugely. And I mean, it might be government leaders, it might be particular individuals, it might be whoever, the corporate sector, and so obviously there always needs to be robust debate, but I think where it becomes problematic is where government basically criticizes in such a way that it closes down voices or it stops the debate. What we need is more debate, not less debate, and I think that is where it becomes dangerous. Is if a particular government leader is somehow or other undermining media freedom in that way, where in fact the discussion doesn't happen, and I think let me leave it there.
What can we do about it?
Well, I mean, good question. I mean, I think what we do is SANEF, and I mean, we're just amongst a number of organizations that do this, but we absolutely go out, we put out statements, we go to government, to particular political parties, to particular political leaders, corporate leaders, and we confront them. And we basically explain, what media freedom means and what it means not to have media freedom, what that actually does to democracy. So we're vigilant. We don't let it just slip. And I think, there are a number of media organizations such as Freedom of Expression Institute, Media Monitoring Africa. But I do think that SANEF does play quite an important role in terms of ensuring that, those issues are put on the table and we don't just let it slip.
And this applies across the board. It doesn't matter which media company is being attacked, I guess.
Absolutely. So I mean, I think that's also the interesting thing about the membership of SANEF. We have a certain membership, and we have a number of editors, and we have a number of journalists that are part of SANEF. But you don't have to be a member of SANEF for us to look at a media freedom breach and to make a comment about it. If there is a breach in the industry, we would want to go out and make a comment and also hold whoever it is to account.
Sli, are we laying a good enough foundation for generations to come in trying to address the issue of diversity? Because our foundation has been laid by our forebears, those that sacrificed so much. Some of them were even exiled. But do you think we, as the current generation in the media industry, do you think we are placing our industry in great position to exist for forever, if I can put it that way?
Yes and no. Yes, in that we remain committed to the craft, and we are having this conversation today because we are trying to sensitize the public to these issues and challenges that we face, and to remind the public why it is so important for a democracy to have an active, vibrant, and free media, and a media that is also well resourced, and why it's important to protect jobs in the media industry, But I think that, we have come short in some areas, and, our credibility has been compromised, and we do need to, take stock, have an introspection. I know that I think in 2018, SANEF commissioned a media ethics inquiry, and I think I heard Smooth, the chairperson, say that they are going to be releasing that report in a few weeks. So, it will be interesting to see what comes out of that report and the recommendations, which we will have, to take seriously. But we have, unfortunately, as well as I say, compromised ourselves, in that, for example, we have allowed there are colleagues who've allowed themselves to get caught up, for example, in things such as the ANC faction battles, and those things really do a lot of damage, and it's damage which, sometimes, it becomes difficult to undo. So we also in how, we hold people account. There are certain individuals who we tend to be very lenient towards, and there are certain individuals, there's this saints and sinners kind of approach, and it reflects in how, we tell stories, and I think that threatens jobs in the media industry, and it's something that we seriously have to look at and really ask ourselves, what is it? And I always say, of course, we are, as journalists, we are humans, and we do not exist, in a vacuum. So we are part of society, and we will be attached to certain positions and this and that. But the code of conduct and media ethics are there to help us safeguard against those things. And I think what we should really work hard on is to abide by those media ethics and the code of conduct, so that it can protect us. And if we do that, and because there is what has happened, unfortunately, because of some of the transgressions that we are guilty of as the media, it has eroded some trust, from the public side, where you get people not really believing what, some of the stories that we write, and we need to work very hard, as well as the media, to restore public trust. And I think if we do that, it will go a long way in hopefully, laying a proper foundational, or at least contributing to a certain extent sustainability for the generation coming after us. Because currently it's you see it, you hear colleagues all the time when commenting on social media, that they're discouraging people from studying journalism because of all sorts of issues that we have. One of them primarily is the lack of jobs, the uncertainty that comes with it, and all the stresses that come with the industry because of the issues that as well we are discussing today. But I think we can change that, because it is it's such a gratifying job. Everything else aside, it is just beautiful to be part of it. We document history, and and we influence the agenda, and so we have a big responsibility, and I think a lot of it we will do the generations coming after us a lot of good if we really took stock and worked on our weaknesses. We're very good at holding other people to account, but we just need to now point the fingers at ourselves and really work hard.
Kate, in 30 seconds, when will SANEF rest in terms of addressing the issue of media diversity in South Africa? I guess what I'm trying to say is, how far will you guys take this debate forward amongst yourselves and through the many platforms that are available? So
yes, I mean, diversity is absolutely critical, and I mean, if if we go back to that, amazing kind of definition of Prof. Cooper's, it's at so many different levels. And I think, my fellow panelists have really put it well in terms of all the different issues that we need to address. So my sense is that, through media organizations such as SANEF, various other media NGOs, and obviously the media industry itself, we have to put all of those issues on the table and make sure that we make progress on it and measure our progress year by year. How much progress have we made? Take stock so that we know what we've achieved and what we still need to do.
Yeah, I wish we can have this discussion a bit longer, but that's all the time we have for today. And please make sure you don't miss our Friday's discussion. I think it's the last webinar, so it's bound to be very interesting. I'd like to thank my panel. Unfortunately, Sandile lost his connections. I mean, technology comes with its own problems, of course. But we thank him for making the time. Kate and Slee, thank you very much for making time. And thank you, those who managed to register and be part of this webinar. We tried to get your questions through as much as we could, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, and have a lovely day going forward. Thank you very much.